Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I made these realistic Settlers of Catan tiles using Blender, geometry nodes, and the free version of Gaia, a really cool realistic terrain generator that you can use to make displacement and texture masks. So if you aren't familiar, Settlers of Catan is a really popular board game that involves building and growing a settlement on the fictional island of Catan, which is made up of these hexagonal tiles, each representing a natural biome. So to start out, I downloaded Gaia for free and opened up a new project file to start building a mountain. I figured I'd start with a mountain primitive, then I used the shaper node to make my mountain a little bit less steep. After this, I added in an erosion node and a wizard node, and these are honestly the real magic of this software. They gave my terrain a much more natural look that I really wasn't able to achieve natively in Blender. I plugged that into an auto level node to give myself a height mask, and then I added in a snowfall node. I adjusted the values and plugged the mask output into a clamp node. This way I could use this as not really a snowfall mask, but instead to mask out where I wanted grass and rock on my final render. With that done, I tagged both the clamp and auto level node for export and renamed them to a mountain mask and mountain height respectively. Then I clicked build, set my resolution to 1024 since unfortunately that's the highest you can go with the free version, and set my range to raw, selected an output folder, and clicked start build. I repeated this process a few times to generate a couple other biomes, making use of some more nodes like fractal terraces, stacks, and the alluvium node. I kept my setup really simple here, but I found that there were tons of great tutorials online for Gaia to create way more complex environments, and I really highly recommend checking them out if you're interested in making more realistic environments for any of your 3D projects. Once I had all my images rendered out that I wanted, I went ahead and opened up a new Blender file. I started out by hopping into geometry nodes, creating a cylinder, and then deleting everything but the top, subdividing it a whole bunch, and then adding in another subdivide node, and plugging this input into my group input node so I can control it from my modifier interface over on the right. After this, in order to optimize my workflow, I ended up actually using the switch node and the isViewport node to allow me to set a viewport resolution and a render resolution. Then I just used a set position node and my height map to offset the vertices in the Z direction. I had to use a little bit of vector math to map my texture around and scale it a little bit. And then I added in a math node to adjust how extreme the displacement was. Next, I added in another cylinder, gave it a lot of depth, and then used the geometry proximity node to sort of create this janky way to select and extrude only the outside edges so that way I could get the sides of my tile. Then I just use a set position node and the top selection for my extrude mesh to set the Z position to 0 for my extruded edges. Finally, I duplicated my janky selection system in order to set different materials for the top and sides of my tile. I also used this to allow me to shade smooth only the top, though I found ultimately that I really like leaving it shaded flat because when I shaded it smooth, it just seemed to smooth out a lot of the detail that I was really trying to add. With my geometry nodes done, it was finally time to hop into the terrain materials. I added a really quick sky texture just to give me something to work with, along with a base plane so that I could see how some reflections would work, and added a basic metal material to both the sides and to that plane. Finally, it was time to create the actual terrain texture. For this, I brought in my mask and plugged it into a mix shader, and then plugged my principled BSDF into the bottom slot. This was going to be my grass texture, so I added 3 noise textures and mapped them all using the object coordinates to get rid of this sort of distortion you can see. Then I added in 2 color ramps and gave both of the noise textures some different grassy colors, and then I masked between them using the third noise texture to sort of give a more natural variation. Finally, I added in a hue saturation value node to refine the color to what I wanted. At the end, I used a 4th noise texture with a high scale, high detail, and high amount of roughness plugged into a bump texture node to sort of give it a more grass-like roughness that I think really helped sell the material. After this, I created a new principled BSDF and added in a Musgrave texture set to ridged multifractal. Then I increased the detail, lowered the dimension, and increased my gain really high, mapped it again with object coordinates, and then finally just duplicated the texture and mixed it into its own coordinates to sort of give another level of randomness that helped to add a nice amount of fine detail. I duplicated my color texture again, and once again added some bump to help sell the rock texture. The process was pretty much the same for all the other terrains, just changing the color a bit was really all that was necessary, so the rest of my workflow actually went by really quickly. I even used the same displacement and texture masks for the grass, wheat field, and forest biomes. Now all I had to do was add the trees to the forest and the wheat to the field. For the trees, I just used Blender's built-in tree generator add-on, Sapling Gen, and created a small pine tree, then put this into a collection, distributed some points onto the top of my forest biome, and instanced my tree onto those. Finally, I randomized the rotation and scale, and then I repeated this process for the wheat field with a simple piece of wheat model, and I was finally done. Thank you all for watching this. If you liked the video, then consider liking, subscribing, all that YouTube jazz. Also, if you've got any other games or media you'd like to see a video like this for, then send me those in the comments below, and I hope to see y'all next time.